The names echoed across Velthor Prime for 72 hours without pause. They played on every broadcast channel. They appeared on every public screen. They whispered from speakers in every home and building across the planet. 800,000 names. 800,000 children. The youngest had been 3 years old. The oldest had been 17. Each name represented a life that had been stolen by order of High Chancellor Zirith. The Velthori people listened. At first, many tried to ignore the broadcast. They changed channels and turned off their screens. But the names kept coming. They leaked through walls and drifted through streets. They became a constant presence that could not be escaped. Some citizens began to count the names. When they realized the count would reach 800,000, many of them wept. Others felt shame for the first time in their lives. They had been told that humans were inferior beings who deserved whatever happened to them. Now they were learning the truth about what their empire had done in their name. High Chancellor Zirith sat on his throne and listened to the names. He had ordered the attack on New Eden without hesitation. He had laughed when he heard about the destruction. He had dismissed the children as irrelevant casualties of necessary conquest. Now those children haunted him. Their names surrounded him like ghosts he could not escape. He felt no guilt. He was not capable of guilt after 4,000 years of absolute power. But he felt something almost as uncomfortable. He felt the certainty that he had made a terrible mistake. Councillor Mirathane moved through the Imperial Council chambers and gathered support for what she knew must happen. The war was lost. The Empire was broken. Continuing to follow Zirith would only bring more destruction. She spoke quietly with other council members and found that many shared her views. They had stayed silent while Zirith ruled because challenging him meant death. Now, with human warships orbiting their world, the calculus had changed. The 72 hours ended. The names stopped broadcasting. Admiral Catherine Cole contacted the Imperial Palace and informed them that Ambassador Daniel Reyes would arrive to discuss terms. She also informed them that President Laura Bennett would attend the negotiations personally. This was unprecedented. No human leader had ever visited Velthor Prime. The message was clear. This was not a surrender meeting between subordinates. This was a conversation between equals. President Bennett arrived aboard the USS Reckoning, escorted by Captain Ryan Torres and a fleet of 50 warships. She was a small woman compared to the towering Velthori, but she carried herself with quiet authority that filled any room she entered. She had spent the journey reading the names of the dead children. She had memorized as many as she could. She wanted to carry them with her when she faced the beings who had murdered them. High Chancellor Zirith prepared to meet the human delegation with his usual arrogance. He dressed in his finest robes and sat on his throne and expected the humans to approach him as supplicants. He was in for a surprise. Before he could receive the delegation, his own council turned against him. Councillor Thane led a group of guards into the throne room and informed Zirith that he had been removed from power. The council had voted. His reign was over. Zirith raged and threatened and demanded loyalty from his followers. None came to his defense. The same beings who had served him for centuries now stood silently as he was taken from his throne. He was not killed. The new government wanted him alive to face justice for his crimes. As guards led him away, he passed Councillor Thane in the corridor. She looked at him with eyes full of sorrow and contempt. She told him that he had destroyed their empire with his arrogance. He had nothing to say in response. President Bennett met with the new Velthori government in a chamber that had once belonged to the High Chancellor. Councillor Thane represented her people. Ambassador Reyes stood beside the president. Admiral Cole attended as well, though she let the diplomats do the talking. The negotiations were surprisingly brief. Humanity had come with terms already prepared, and the Velthori had no leverage to demand changes. The terms were severe but fair. The Velthari military would be permanently reduced to defensive forces only. They would never again possess the ability to attack other species. War reparations would be paid over 500 years to help rebuild what the Empire had destroyed across the galaxy. High Chancellor Zirith and every military officer who participated in the New Eden massacre would face trial before a galactic court. And on Velthar Prime itself, a memorial would be built listing the name of every child who had been killed. Counselor Thane accepted the terms on behalf of her people. She apologized for what had been done, though she knew that words could never undo the harm. She promised that the Velthari would honor the agreement and work to become something better than they had been. President Bennett accepted the apology graciously, but firmly reminded the counselor that promises meant nothing without action. Ambassador Reyes stood before the Galactic Council one final time. The same beings who had refused to help humanity now listened in silence as he spoke. He told them that humanity had won the war against the Velthari Empire. He told them that humanity had chosen not to commit genocide despite having the power to do so. He told them that this choice was what separated humans from those who would kill children. The Council voted unanimously to recognize humanity as a major galactic power. They had no other option. President Bennett addressed the Council after Reyes finished. She spoke quietly, without anger or triumph. She explained that humanity had learned something from this war. Power without mercy was just cruelty. Victory without justice was just revenge. Humanity would use its strength to protect the innocent and punish the guilty. They would never forget what had been done to their children. But they would not let that grief turn them into monsters. They would be better than those who had tried to destroy them. Admiral Cole returned to the ruins of New Eden after the war ended. The planet was still scarred from the bombardment. The craters where schools had stood were now filled with rainwater and new growth. She walked through what had once been the Eastern settlement and remembered the children who had died there. She made a silent promise to them. Their deaths would not be forgotten. Their memory would shape the future of humanity forever. Construction began on a new city at the site of the massacre. It would serve as a school for children from across the galaxy. Species that had once feared each other would send their young ones to learn together. The teachers would be human and Velthari and dozens of other species. The curriculum would focus on peace and understanding and the value of every life. It would be a living memorial to the children who had been lost at the entrance to the school. Workers installed a simple plaque. The words on it were proposed by Captain Torres and approved by President Bennett. They read, "They were children. They had names. They mattered. And we did not forget." The galaxy changed after the war. Species that had bullied their neighbors became more careful. Empires that had ignored the weak began to reconsider. A new saying spread among the stars, passed from one civilization to another as a warning and a lesson. The saying was simple. It said, "Do not harm their children." The humans gave one warning. They meant it. High Chancellor Zirith was tried and convicted of crimes against sentient life. He was sentenced to spend the rest of his existence in a prison cell, listening to the names of his victims on an endless loop. Some thought this punishment was too harsh. Others thought it was not harsh enough. President Bennett thought it was exactly right. He would spend his remaining years surrounded by the ghosts he had created. Ambassador Reyes retired from diplomatic service and spent his final years teaching young humans about the importance of standing up for what was right. Admiral Cole continued to serve until her body could no longer support her, then passed peacefully in her sleep with the names of the lost children on her lips. Captain Torres became an admiral himself and spent decades protecting the innocent across the galaxy. President Bennett served 2 more terms and was remembered as the leader who showed humanity at its best. The children of New Eden were never forgotten. Their names were taught in every human school. Their memory was honored on every human world. And whenever humanity faced darkness in the years to come, they remembered the lesson of the massacre. They remembered that strength meant nothing without mercy. They remembered that victory meant nothing without justice. They remembered that even in their darkest moments, they had chosen to be better. And that choice had made all the difference. The human fleet moved through Velthury space like a storm that could not be stopped. World after world fell before them. Military bases were destroyed. Defensive fleets were shattered. The empire that had ruled the galaxy for 50,000 years watched helplessly as its power crumbled. But something strange happened as the humans advanced. They did not behave like conquerors. They behaved like something the galaxy had never seen before. Admiral Catherine Cole established rules of engagement that every human commander was required to follow. Civilian populations were never to be harmed. Infrastructure that served ordinary people was not to be destroyed. Any Velthury soldier who surrendered was to be treated with dignity and respect. Prisoners were to receive food, water, and medical care. These rules were not suggestions. They were orders. Any human officer who violated them would face severe punishment. Captain Ryan Torres led the Vanguard fleet through the outer territories of the Empire. His ships engaged enemy forces with overwhelming power, but he always offered surrender before attacking. When Velthury commanders accepted, he kept his word and spared their lives. When they refused, he destroyed them quickly and efficiently. He took no pleasure in the killing. He simply did what was necessary and moved on to the next target. The Velthury people had been told for generations that all other species were inferior. They had been taught that humans were primitive savages who deserved to be conquered. Now those same primitive savages were conquering them, and instead of burning their cities, they were protecting their families. Ordinary Velthury citizens did not know what to make of this. Some refused to believe it. Others began to question everything they had been taught. High Chancellor Xereth grew desperate as his empire crumbled. He ordered his remaining fleets to use civilian populations as shields. He commanded his admirals to position their ships in orbit around heavily populated worlds, believing that humans would not attack if innocent lives were at stake. It was a strategy born of fear and cruelty. It was also a mistake. Admiral Cole responded to each hostage situation differently. Sometimes she negotiated with local commanders and convinced them to surrender. Sometimes her ships used precision strikes to eliminate military targets without harming civilians. Sometimes she simply waited until the Velthury realized that humanity would not be intimidated and gave up on their own. Every time, she found a way to achieve her objectives without mass casualties. It took longer and cost more human lives, but she refused to become what she was fighting against. Counselor Myra Thane was a Velthury diplomat who had opposed the attack on New Eden from the beginning. She had been one of only 12 members of the Imperial Council who voted against the massacre. When her voice was ignored, she had remained silent and watched her people march toward destruction. Now, as the human fleet approached the core systems, she made a decision that would change history. Counselor Thane contacted Admiral Cole through a secret channel. She told the human commander that not all Velthury supported what had been done to the children of New Eden. She told her that many citizens were horrified when they learned the truth. She offered to help end the war quickly and peacefully. In exchange, she asked only that humanity show mercy to the innocent when the fighting was over. Admiral Cole listened to the counselor's words and considered them carefully. She did not trust the Velthury. She had every reason to hate them. But she also knew that peace would require someone on the other side who wanted it too. She agreed to work with Counselor Thane and kept their communication secret from everyone except President Bennett. The war continued for 3 months. Human forces captured 147 Velthury worlds. They destroyed over 2,000 enemy warships. They dismantled military installations and weapons factories across 1,000 light-years of territory. But they did not commit atrocities. They did not slaughter civilians. They did not burn cities or poison water supplies. They fought like soldiers, not like monsters. Other species across the galaxy watched in stunned silence. The Velthari Empire had been the dominant power for 50,000 years. No one had ever challenged them and won. Now a species that had been dismissed as primitive was tearing them apart with ease. And instead of responding with cruelty, the humans were showing restraint. It was something the galaxy had never seen from a conquering force. Captain Torres led the assault on the Velthari shipyards at Corvin Station. This facility had produced warships for the Empire for over 10,000 years. Its destruction would cripple the Velthari ability to rebuild their fleet. Torres knew the station was defended by 12,000 soldiers and over 100 defensive platforms. He also knew that 15,000 civilian workers lived on the station with their families. Torres contacted the station commander and offered him a choice: surrender and evacuate the civilians or face destruction. The commander refused, believing that the humans would not attack with so many innocents present. He was wrong about the attack, but right about the innocents. Torres deployed ground forces instead of orbital bombardment. Human soldiers fought their way through the station corridor by corridor, engaging only military targets. The battle took 4 days. When it was over, the shipyards were destroyed and the Velthari military force was eliminated. The civilian casualties numbered exactly 0. Admiral Cole received a message from President Bennett as the fleet approached the core systems. The president reminded her of why they were fighting. They were not seeking revenge. They were seeking justice. There was a difference. Revenge meant causing pain for its own sake. Justice meant holding the guilty accountable while protecting the innocent. Humanity had to remain who they were, even in war. Especially in war, the human fleet reached the edge of the Velthar home system after 3 months of constant advance. 2,000 warships held position around the ancient birthplace of the Empire. Their weapons could reduce the planet to rubble in hours. Their power was absolute and unchallengeable. High Chancellor Zirith looked at the sensor readings and finally understood that his empire was finished. Zirith broadcast a message to the human fleet. He offered to negotiate. He offered concessions and apologies and promises of peace. He said whatever he thought would save himself and his throne. Admiral Cole listened to his words and felt nothing but cold contempt. This was the creature who had ordered the deaths of 800,000 children. This was the monster who had laughed when humanity issued its warning. Now he wanted mercy. Admiral Cole sent her response. She told Zirith that he could negotiate with Ambassador Reyes. She told him that the terms would be non-negotiable. And she told him that before any talks could begin, the Velthari would hear something important. She told him, "First, you will hear the names." The fleet remained in position around Velthar Prime. They did not fire. They did not attack. Instead, Admiral Cole ordered the transmission of a list. The names of all 800,000 children who had died on New Eden began broadcasting to every receiver on the planet. The transmission would continue without pause for 72 hours, the same amount of time the Velthari had given humanity to evacuate. Every citizen on Velthar Prime would hear those names. They would know exactly what their empire had done. And then, only then, would humanity discuss the future. Captain Ryan Torres had served in the human fleet for 20 years. He had commanded patrol ships and escort vessels and cargo transports. He had never commanded anything larger than a frigate with a crew of 40. When Admiral Cole assigned him to the USS Reckoning, he thought there had been some mistake. The Reckoning was a battleship 3 kilometers long with a crew of 8,000. It carried weapons that could destroy a moon and shields that could absorb the energy of a star. It was the most powerful vessel humanity had ever built, and they were giving it to him. Admiral Cole explained that Torres had been chosen for a specific reason. He was not a glory seeker or a hot-headed warrior. He was careful and methodical and valued the lives of his crew above all else. Becoming war would require commanders who could win without losing themselves to hatred and revenge. Torres accepted the command with a quiet nod and a heavy heart. He understood what was being asked of him. He would carry the anger of 800,000 dead children, but he would not let that anger turn him into a monster. Dr. Elena Cruz was the lead scientist of the Advanced Research Division. She had spent her entire career developing the technologies that humanity had kept hidden from the galaxy. When the fold space pockets opened across human territory, she watched with pride and sorrow. Pride because her work would help humanity survive. Sorrow because she had always hoped it would never be needed. She briefed Admiral Cole on the capabilities of the true human fleet. The ships used quantum-locked armor that could repair itself almost instantly. The weapons fired concentrated dark energy that ignored conventional shields. The engines could cross the galaxy in days rather than months. Every system was generations ahead of anything the Veltari possessed. Admiral Cole asked Dr. Cruz how humanity had advanced so far beyond the rest of the galaxy. Cruz explained that humans had a unique advantage. They were not afraid to fail. Other species spent centuries perfecting a technology before moving to the next step. Humans tried 100 different approaches at once, learned from their mistakes, and kept pushing forward. What took other species 1,000 years to develop, humans achieved in 50. It was not intelligence or resources that made humans different. It was their willingness to fall down and get back up again. The true human fleet emerged from fold space simultaneously across 200 locations. Ships appeared in orbit around human colonies and space stations. They materialized in the empty spaces between stars. They rose from hidden facilities on moons and asteroids. In a single moment, humanity went from having 12 visible warships to having 4,700. The galaxy had never seen anything like it. Species that had dismissed humans as primitive suddenly found themselves staring at a fleet that could challenge any power in existence. Vel Tari Admiral Korath commanded the armada sent to conquer Earth. He was a veteran of 300 campaigns and had never lost a battle. His fleet of 500 warships was the largest force the Veltari had deployed in over 1,000 years. He expected to reach Earth, crush whatever pathetic resistance the humans offered, and be home in time for the Harvest Festival. When his sensors detected the human fleet waiting at the edge of the solar system, he assumed there was a malfunction. Admiral Korath ordered his sensors recalibrated. The readings remained the same. Over 400 human warships were holding position between his fleet and Earth. Each one was larger than anything in his armada. Each one radiated energy signatures that his tactical officers could not identify. For the first time in his long career, Korath felt something cold settle in his stomach. It was not quite fear. It was the realization that everything he thought he knew was wrong. Admiral Cole broadcast a message to the Veltari fleet. Her face appeared on every screen in the enemy armada. She spoke in a calm, steady voice that carried the weight of 800,000 dead children. She told Admiral Korath that his empire had made a terrible mistake. She told him that humanity had given one warning, and that warning had been ignored. She told him that there would not be another. Then she said 5 words that Veltari historians would remember forever. She said, "You killed our children." Admiral Korath had 2 choices. He could retreat and report to High Chancellor Zirith that the humans were far more powerful than expected. Or he could attack and hope that his fleet could overcome the enemy through superior numbers and experience. He chose to attack. It was the wrong choice. The Battle of Seoul began at 1400 hours Earth time. The Valkyrie fleet charged forward in their standard attack formation, confident that their shields and weapons would prove superior despite the unexpected human numbers. They were wrong about everything. Human weapons cut through Valkyrie shields like they did not exist. Dark energy cannons vaporized cruisers with single shots. Quantum torpedoes bypassed armor entirely and detonated inside enemy ships. The Valkyrie had never faced anything like this. They had no defense against weapons they did not understand. Captain Torres commanded the reckoning from the center of the human formation. He watched as enemy ships exploded around him and fought to keep his emotions under control. Part of him wanted to laugh and scream and celebrate each Valkyrie death. Part of him remembered the children and wanted to make the enemy suffer. But he pushed those feelings aside and focused on the battle. He gave orders with precision and clarity. He protected his crew and minimized risks. He fought like a professional, not like a man seeking revenge. The battle lasted 4 hours. When it ended, 487 Valkyrie ships had been destroyed. Human losses totaled 11 vessels. Admiral Karath died when his flagship was torn apart by concentrated fire from 3 human battleships. 13 Valkyrie ships managed to escape the slaughter and fled toward home space. They carried news that would shake the Empire to its core. Admiral Cole did not celebrate the victory. She stood on her bridge and looked at the debris field where the Valkyrie fleet had died. She thought about the children of New Eden and wondered if they would approve of what humanity had done. She hoped they would understand that this was necessary. She hoped they would forgive her for the lives she had taken in their name. High Chancellor Zereth received word of the defeat from the 13 surviving ships. He listened to their reports with growing disbelief. His admirals told him that human weapons were impossible. They told him that human ships were invincible. They told him the Valkyrie Empire had just lost its largest fleet to a species they had considered insignificant. Zereth dismissed his admirals and sat alone on his throne for a long time. He was 4,000 years old. He had conquered hundreds of worlds and destroyed dozens of species. And for the first time in his ancient life, he felt afraid. President Bennett addressed humanity after the battle. She told them that justice had begun, but it was not complete. She told them that the Valkyrie would answer for what they had done to the children of New Eden. She told them that humanity would not rest until every responsible party faced consequences. But she also told them something else. She told them that humanity would not become monsters in pursuit of justice. They would fight with honor and mercy. They would protect civilians and accept surrenders. They would prove to the galaxy that strength and decency could exist together. The human fleet began its advance toward Valkyrie space. 4,000 warships moved through the galaxy like a tide that could not be stopped. And in the throne room of Valkyr Prime, an ancient emperor realized that his empire might not survive what he had awakened. The planet Verdana IV was beautiful in the morning light. Green fields stretched across the valleys and rivers cut through the land like silver ribbons. The humans who lived there called their home New Eden, and they had built something wonderful in the 30 years since they first arrived. 2.3 million people lived on this world, farming the rich soil and building cities that grew a little larger each year. Among them were 800,000 children who attended schools scattered across the colony. These schools were more than buildings. They were places where the next generation of humans learned to dream about the stars. Governor Marcus Webb stood at his office window and watched a transport ship carry students to the eastern settlement. He was a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes, but he smiled whenever he saw the children. They were the reason New Eden existed. They were the future. His communicator beeped, and he turned away from the window to answer it. The face of Lieutenant Commander Nina Santos appeared on the screen. She was the communications officer aboard the USS Resolute, one of 12 ships that made up the entire defense fleet for this sector. Her expression told him that something was very wrong. Governor Webb listened as she explained the situation. The Velthari Empire had sent a message. They were claiming the Verdana system as part of their expansion corridor. Humanity had 72 hours to evacuate the entire colony or face consequences. Webb felt his stomach drop. The Velthari had ruled the galaxy for 50,000 years. They had conquered hundreds of species and destroyed dozens more. Humanity had only been traveling among the stars for 400 years. They were nothing compared to the Velthari. They were insects beneath the boot of a giant. Admiral Catherine Cole received the same message aboard her flagship. She was a woman who had spent her entire life in service to Earth, and she had never felt more helpless than she did at that moment. Her fleet of 12 ships could not stop a Velthari armada. They could barely scratch the paint on a Velthari cruiser. But she moved her ships into position near the colony anyway. She would not abandon those people without a fight, even if that fight would last only minutes. On Earth, Ambassador Daniel Reyes rushed to the Galactic Council chambers. The council was made up of representatives from 300 spacefaring species, and they were supposed to maintain peace and order in the galaxy. Reyes was a short man with dark hair and a voice that could fill a room. He had spent 20 years learning the art of diplomacy, and he used every skill he had as he stood before the council and begged them to intervene. The Velthari were going to destroy a peaceful colony. They were going to kill millions of innocent people, including hundreds of thousands of children. Surely the council would not allow this. The Velthari representative was a tall creature with pale blue skin and 4 arms. His name was impossible for humans to pronounce, so they simply called him the Voice. He listened to Ambassador Reyes with what might have been amusement. When Reyes finished speaking, the Voice stood and addressed the council. He explained that the Velthari Empire had every right to claim any system they wished. Humanity had no legal standing to challenge them. They were a minor species with no significant military power. If they did not wish to be destroyed, they should evacuate immediately. The council voted. 112 species voted in favor of intervention. 188 voted against. The matter was closed. Ambassador Reyes returned to Earth with the news. President Laura Bennett listened in silence. She was a woman who had led humanity through difficult times before, but she had never faced anything like this. She asked how long they had. Reyes told her they had 61 hours remaining. Bennett closed her eyes and thought about the children on New Eden. She thought about their parents and teachers. She thought about the farmers who had worked so hard to turn an alien world into a home. Then she ordered the evacuation to begin, knowing they could never save everyone in time. Governor Webb organized the evacuation with desperate efficiency. Transport ships landed at every settlement and began loading passengers. But there were too many people and not enough ships. The math was brutal and simple. They could save perhaps 300,000 people in 72 hours. That meant 2 million would be left behind. Webb made the hardest decision of his life. He ordered all children to be evacuated first. Parents said goodbye to their sons and daughters and put them on ships, believing they would see them again. They were wrong. Admiral Cole contacted the Velthari fleet commander, a creature named High Admiral Vorn. She asked for more time. She begged for mercy. Vorn laughed at her. He told her that the Velthari did not negotiate with inferior species. He told her that the deadline would not be extended by even 1 second. Then he ended the transmission. Cole looked at her bridge crew and saw the same fear and anger she felt. Lieutenant Commander Santos was crying silently at her station. Cole told her crew to prepare for battle. They would die, but they would die fighting. The 72 hours passed. The evacuation ships carried away 120,000 people, mostly children from the nearest settlements. But 800,000 children remained at schools across the planet, waiting for rescue ships that would never arrive. Their teachers told them everything would be fine. Their teachers lied because the truth was too horrible to speak. The Valkyrie fleet arrived at exactly the moment the deadline expired. 200 warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel and immediately began targeting the surface. High Admiral Vorn gave one final order. He told his gunners to fire on the educational settlements first. He wanted humanity to understand what happened to species that defied the Valkyrie Empire. He wanted them to feel pain that would last for generations. The orbital bombardment began at 1400 hours. Colony time. Admiral Cole ordered her 12 ships to attack. They fired everything they had at the Valkyrie fleet. They destroyed exactly 0 enemy vessels. The Valkyrie returned fire almost casually, wiping out 8 human ships in the first exchange. Cole watched her fleet die around her as the planet below burned. She screamed orders that no longer mattered. She fired weapons that did nothing. And she watched, helpless, as columns of fire fell from the sky onto schools full of children. The bombardment lasted 17 minutes. When it ended, 800,000 children were dead. The schools were craters. The teachers who had stayed with their students were ash. Governor Webb stood at his window and watched his world burn. He did not move. He did not speak. Something inside him simply stopped working. On Earth, the transmission feeds showed everything in real time. Billions of people watched their children die. They watched the fires and the smoke and the Valkyrie ships hanging in orbit like judges who had delivered a sentence. President Bennett watched from her office with tears running down her face. Ambassador Reyes watched from his quarters and felt something cold and hard forming in his chest. Admiral Cole, aboard one of the 4 surviving ships, watched and made a silent promise. She promised the dead children that this was not over. She promised them that humanity would answer. The galaxy expected humanity to surrender. The galaxy expected them to accept their place as a conquered species. The galaxy had no idea what they had just awakened. Earth fell silent in the days after the massacre. The streets that normally buzzed with life were empty. The factories that ran day and night went quiet. Schools closed because teachers could not stop crying long enough to teach. Parents held their living children close and wept for the ones who would never come home. Every nation, every city, every village felt the weight of what had happened. 800,000 children were gone. They had names and faces and dreams that would never be fulfilled. The grief was so heavy that it seemed to press down on the entire planet like a physical force. President Laura Bennett addressed the world 3 days after the attack. She stood at a simple podium with no flags or decorations behind her. Her face was pale, and her eyes were red from crying, but her voice was steady. She spoke about the children who had died. She spoke about their bravery and their innocence. She spoke about the teachers who had stayed with them until the end. She did not raise her voice. She did not pound her fist. She simply told the truth about what had been done to humanity. And then, at the end of her speech, she said 8 words that would echo across the galaxy for centuries to come. She said them quietly, almost softly, like a mother making a promise to her lost children. She said, "They will answer for what they have done." The Galactic Council sent messages of condolence. The representatives of 300 species expressed their sadness and their sympathy. They told humanity that the loss of so many young lives was truly tragic. But they also explained that the Valkyrie Empire had acted within their legal rights. The Verdana system was in unclaimed space. The Valkyrie had given warning before attacking. According to galactic law, no crime had been committed. There was nothing the Council could do. Ambassador Daniel Reyes returned to the Council chambers 1 week after the massacre. He carried a single document with him. He carried a single document with him. The council members expected him to beg for justice or demand action or threaten consequences that humanity could not deliver. Instead, he walked to the center of the chamber and placed the document on the floor. He told the council that this document contained the names of all 800,000 children who had been killed. He told them that each name represented a life that had been stolen. Then he turned and walked out of the chamber without another word. The document remained on the floor. No one touched it. High Chancellor Zereth ruled the Velthari Empire from his throne on Velthar Prime. He was ancient, even by Velthari standards, having lived for nearly 4,000 years. He had conquered more worlds than he could count. He had destroyed species that dared to challenge his authority. When his advisors informed him that humanity had issued a formal warning, he laughed. The sound echoed through his throne room like the cackling of some ancient predator. He asked his admirals how long it would take to conquer Earth. They told him 1 standard year would be sufficient. He told them to begin preparations immediately. General Howard Price was the supreme commander of all Earth military forces. He was an old soldier with scars on his face and steel in his spine. 3 days after the massacre, he met with President Bennett in a bunker deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. He told her it was time to activate Protocol Omega. She asked him if he was certain. He said he had never been more certain of anything in his life. She gave the order. Dr. Samuel Vance was the director of the Advanced Research Division. For 40 years, he had led a team of scientists working on projects that officially did not exist. He had kept secrets that would shock the galaxy. When General Price contacted him with orders to implement Protocol Omega, he felt a strange mixture of sadness and relief. Sadness because this day had finally come. Relief because humanity would finally show the galaxy who they truly were. The Velthari and every other species in the galaxy believed that humans were weak. They believed that humans had only 12 military vessels. They believed that human technology was primitive and their weapons were harmless. They believed these things because humanity had wanted them to believe. For 200 years, humans had hidden their true capabilities. They had played the role of a minor species struggling to survive in a dangerous galaxy. They had smiled and bowed and accepted insults from species who considered themselves superior. All the while, they had been building. Dr. Vance explained the truth to President Bennett in simple terms. 200 years ago, human scientists had discovered fold space technology. This allowed them to create pockets of dimensional space where objects could be hidden from all known sensors. They had kept this discovery secret from every other species in the galaxy. They had used it to build a fleet that no one knew existed. They had constructed weapons based on physics that the Velthari considered impossible. And they had waited, hoping they would never need to use any of it. High Chancellor Zereth received a formal response from Earth 1 week after issuing his conquest orders. The response was simple. It stated that humanity had given one warning. It stated that the Velthari had ignored that warning. It stated that there would be no second warning. Zereth read the message and tossed it aside. He called for wine and entertainment. He told his admirals that humans were even more foolish than he had thought. Making threats they could not back up would only make their conquest more humiliating. Deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, there was a facility that appeared on no maps. It had been built in secret over the course of 150 years. The workers who constructed it had lived their entire lives underground and had never spoken of their work to anyone outside. This facility contained the heart of Protocol Omega, massive. Doors that had remained sealed for 2 centuries began to open for the first time. Admiral Catherine Cole had survived the massacre with 4 ships and broken hearts. She had spent the week since the attack writing letters to the families of her fallen crews. She had attended memorial services and held weeping parents and promised them that their children had not died in vain. When she received orders to report to the Pacific facility, she did not know what to expect. When she arrived and saw what humanity had built, she fell to her knees and wept again. But these were different tears. These were tears of hope. The facility contained the first wave of the true human fleet. Ships twice the size of anything the Valkyrie had ever built. Weapons that could crack planets. Shields that could withstand the sun. And this was only the beginning. Dr. Vance told Admiral Cole that there were similar facilities hidden across human space. The total fleet numbered 4,700 warships. Each one was more powerful than anything the galaxy had ever seen. Admiral Cole asked Dr. Vance why humanity had hidden this for so long. He told her that the galaxy was a dangerous place for young species. Powerful civilizations often destroyed potential rivals before they could grow strong enough to threaten them. Humanity had learned this lesson early. They had decided that it was better to appear weak and survive than to appear strong and be eliminated. So they had hidden their true power and waited for the day when they would need it. That day had come. President Bennett broadcast a final message to the Valkyrie Empire. Her voice was calm and cold. She told High Chancellor Zirith that humanity had given one warning. She told him that his empire had chosen to ignore it. She told him that this was his last chance to surrender and face justice for the murder of 800,000 children. If he refused, humanity would come for him, and they would not stop until justice was done. Zirith watched the message and laughed again. Then he ordered his armada to depart for Earth. 500 of the most powerful warships in the Valkyrie fleet began their journey to conquer humanity. They expected an easy victory. They were about to learn how wrong they were